Hello, my fellow schizotypals. Did you hear that noise? What up, doe? And welcome back to High Lit with Karhlyle Fletcher. Episode 35. Yeah, so we're going with it. Mic's up, all that's good. Cool. So something I wanted to share. So everybody always talks about home defense, right? Everybody is always on the side of you need to get something to defend yourself and your family and your home and all that. And luckily we have the Second Amendment. But also, you know what takes no ammo? And you know what costs no money? Is a fucking spear. So, as you can see, this is electrical tape, a knife, and a pool cue. And you have a perfectly good melee weapon that is very stabby and very stable, and it's got good muscle movement, and it's free, and it's incredibly intimidating. Like literally, somebody that comes up, you come to the door, and you're just like, "Hey, what's up?" It's like, "Yeah, we got an issue. We got an issue." So it's like nobody wants to pick on the guy with makeshift spear. For bonus points, you can go naked, and if you're a naked man with a spear, literally no one is gonna fuck with you. It's how rednecks are scary because it's like you're in the swamp that only they know, and they have a crossbow and they fucking whistle like bird whistles and deer call. As urban people, this is what we have. We have bat shit. So they have their weirdo fucking swamp culture. We have our mentally unstable, cheap as fuck, great defense weapon culture. We'll do a tutorial on how to build one soon, but I just wanted to show off the first spear I've built. I've given it many a practice, that's why it's a little that, but it still do pierce, So anyways, that's the spear. The reason why I'm really into the makeshift spear is, again, no ammo, affordable, and also it is the weapon of the lower class because, not everybody can afford a gun, not everybody can afford a spear, not everybody can afford a sword, so having just a stick and a pointy bit where you can get from your fucking kitchen, that's good. Here, we recently planted some trees. This is another great example of a stick, so like that, you've got some real advantage with your distance with this fucker, so you get something like this, bro, you have home defense fine, because you are over there, you're over here. That's how much you're risking. That's how much of an advantage you have. So, just a little bit of advice for people who want to get into some sort of responsibility. Obviously, don't hurt yourself with these things, and these things are not toys, and hopefully you don't have to use them at all. But just in case, it's it's going to be more intimidating than just going out with a baseball bat, And I'm pretty sure these things, I don't understand why these things would be illegal at all. I can look into the law and see. If it is, it's an art prop, so I don't know. But it is, I think that these things are very, just a piece of advice, I'd say. And also, it is weapons of the lower class, when there was a peasant revolution or when there's people who are trying to defend their town from pirates, that's what they would do. And then they go out and that's just, I would consider it a piece of history, really. But anyways, what about making everything freelance? Getting paid to clean up the side of the road, getting paid to do some line care, make it a citywide app and have it so that everyone can sign up whenever, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and get paid to get odd jobs done. Don't make it too lucrative so you're not just burning money, but people will do anything for money here in Detroit, so get them to invest their effort in what's around them. Not only could this save money for the city so they don't have to hire professionals, it puts money back into the community and gives those at the bottom access to getting involved with their locality. It can work in groups and solo, and maybe hook it up with a GoPro or something, or just some sort of your phone. So it's you just click that there, and then you can have a body cam to prove people are doing what they're saying they're doing. And I think it would immediately put investment back into the community and have people motivated to improve the environment around them. The reason why I bring this up is that those with part-time employment or those on disability were more likely to engage in trying cannabis as medicine in this study. So the study we're looking at is this study, exploring the use of cannabis as a substitute for prescription drugs in a convenience sample. So with disability, duh, because pain is the most common reason people give for using cannabis as medicine. So like, yeah, people on disability are going to have pain. However, I also believe that all the under and unemployed are underutilized, and that decentralized freelance options, again, as simple as brushing a street or picking up some filth, would give them the ability to contribute in a productive manner. That's where it's like, I think that an app that would just allow people to do city chores, basically, you know, where it's like, whether that's like, you know, tending to a field, picking up some blight, mowing a lawn, things like that. You know, it's like people have the ability to do this, and I think they even have the will to do this. So if you motivated them a little bit, I think it would transform everything. So, so the odds of using cannabis as medicine as a substitute for prescription drugs were 1.25 times higher among women with a 95% confidence interval, 2.2 times higher among users on disability pension, and 1.7 times higher among users in reduced employment compared to non-substitution users. Users with an access to medical cannabis via prescription were 1.68 times more likely to be substitution users, while level of recreational experience was not significantly associated with substitution use. While the level of recreational experience was not significantly associated with substitution use. There were no significant associations between using cannabis as a substitution in age, education, and region. The type of cannabis used varied depending on the types of prescription drugs substituted. So yeah, type of cannabis used varied depending on the type of prescription drug substituted. CBD oil was the most prevalent. Oh wow, I forgot to do the thing again. At least I caught it 6 minutes in, but let me just. Nope, that's not what I want. There we go. That's what I want. So let's just get here. But yeah, so type of cannabis used varied depending on the types of prescription drugs substituted. CBD oil was the most prevalent type of cannabis used among those who substituted arthritis medication, pain medication, anti-epileptics, and antidepressants, but not among those who substituted antipsychotics, where hash, pot, or skunk were the most common types used. The odds of using hash, pot, skunk were 1.4 times higher among those who substituted antidepressants, and 3.37 times higher among those who substituted antipsychotics. So like even people who are substituting antipsychotics are double more likely to be looking for cannabis than people with depression. So, you know, it's like there's this idea, and again, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm theorizing here, but I think that we're getting somewhere, is that cannabis is, you know, toted, like, it's like, well, it's like it has mood boosting effects, and like, yeah, that'd be good for anxiety and depression, but like, so why is it so appealing to people trying to get off antipsychotics? Because this, and not to say that this is, you know, a finalized piece of work, but here you have over double the prevalence with people who are trying to replace antipsychs with traditional cannabis. So users who substituted pain medication were 1.72 times more likely to use THC oil, and users who substituted arthritis medications were 1.4 times more likely to use CBD oil. Our findings are also in accordance with a recent Italian study where the unintended legalization of CBD-based cannabis products with less than 0.6% THC was associated with a significant decrease in the sale of prescription drugs, particularly antioxidants, sedatives, and antipsychotics. This is of particular public interest, as CBD has been shown to have a better safety profile in terms of side effects and abuse potential relative to THC. So this suggests that substitution users may have the same lesser of two evils perception on, so let's look at, oh, that's not that. Did I fuck that up? No, I did not fuck that up. But lesser of two, bam. So we're looking for this suggest. There it is, right there. Cool. And the mic's still, mic's still hot. But yeah, so this suggests that substitution users may have the same lesser of two evils perspective. This suggests that substitution users may have the same lesser of two evils perspective on the medical utility of cannabis that was documented among some physicians in Israel, where cannabis becomes medicine not only on the basis of what it is in terms of effect, but on what it is not in terms of side effects when compared to prescription drugs. Considering the growth and use of cannabis as medicine, it is likely that this perspective will result in an increasing number of people seeking information and advice about the effectiveness of cannabis as medicine and use of cannabis as medicine as a substitute for prescription drugs, even in the absence of rigorous clinical trials and despite lack of legal access to medical cannabis. Future research is needed to assess effects and side effects of long-term use of cannabis from longitudinal settings. So yeah, that's a lot of information, and that's a lot. Like, this is very, I think that this is very fascinating, because you have, again, this prevalence of people who are trying to replace antipsychotics who want cannabis, and it's like, okay, yeah, maybe it's not perfect, and maybe the side effects profile isn't completely non-present, but people hate antipsychotics. I was on antipsychotics as a teenager, like when I was like 13, and it was never maybe your family's abusing you. It was never maybe you don't have access to peers. It was never maybe people don't engage with you on the things that you love in your life and don't treat you like an individual. It was always, what's the chemical theory of your brain? How do we fix you? How do we give this to you and change you? And so again, those trying to replace antipsychotics use cannabis products containing THC over CBD oil. And to me, this highlights a demand for something beyond the effects of CBD, something that's a light mood booster, and also like something that helps change your mind. The study highlights the need to review how this can make conditions worse, but I also believe a study on low dose yet potent THC products could prove illuminatory on those who suffer from negative affect and general numbness, calmness, and psychosis in psychotic patients. So this opinion may be supported by this study, which is, recently came out. And it's about the spiritual benefit of cannabis, which clearly displays an interest in the spiritual aspects of cannabis by the public. Considering that even the Trump administration admitted that Americans need to become more spiritual and engage in activities such as meditation and mindfulness, it seems obvious that not only is there an appetite for spiritual life, but a real need. If something as basic and even as silly as cannabis can help them get there, then it's a blessing no matter what it comes in. So people are losing out on their spiritual and moral life, and this is happening when we're all free from the beginning. So let's get personal. My name is Karhlyle Fletcher, and I grew up a neglected child that no one really stood up for or invested the time and understanding. By the time I was 18, I had completely checked out of society, never been to church, had little to no friends, loved sex, but whatever, that was it. Other than dating, I had nothing. And America doesn't treat that as a problem. There's nothing they have to tell you. Maybe go to church, maybe try to start a family, maybe go to school, maybe whatever. All these half-hearted suggestions, but ultimately no one knows what the fuck you should do at all. When you're just this kid that wasn't raised, that just comes out at 18 and it's like, both my parents are dead and I'm trying to figure out my way in the world, people are like, oh shit. I don't know what you should do. I don't know what you should do. And like, I have these memories of going around Detroit and like, I've never owned a car in my life. I've never been in a financial position where that would be responsible. So I've spent my life, taking Ubers and things like that. And I remember, I'm a chatty guy, so I'd chat with like my Uber drivers. And I remember several people like hearing my story. And like, for me, it's like, I try to move on, because I think that if you let your struggles with people who didn't love you define you, then you're letting somebody who doesn't love you define your life. And so for me, the best thing that I try to do is realize that my emotions compared to the sheer inconsequentiality of my parents is nothing, and I am but a speck of sand in the endless universe of how much they don't matter. So it's like just trying to move on from that. Yet when these Detroiters, like in like locals and like people I've talked to, and and it doesn't matter if they're Uber drivers or like fellow bar patrons or like coworkers or whatever, everybody like, no, you should be angry. Like, my therapist tells me what happened to you was unfair, and it is right to be upset about that, So it's like this advice doesn't really help, because it's like I understand that I should be upset, but I don't want to be. And it's not that I don't want to feel the feelings. It's that I want to feel the feelings and then develop to another point where I'm no longer defined by that trauma. But America doesn't really understand that, because your story is your story, and if people hurt you, you should be angry. But no one knew what to tell me that didn't ultimately mean shut the fuck up and go to church or whatever. Everyone wants to think they understand tragedy and hardship, but no one ever said a single useful thing to me, except for when my ex-girlfriends said that they were proud of me, which my mother and father never did. That I was a strong person and that they believed in my mission. And again, like, I never got that attention or support from my family, so getting it from relationships was the most healing thing to me, and like, it helped me understand like how to actually connect and relate to people. And I had to make myself by the sword and by the skin of my teeth. America gave me no help, direction, or support. Books did. My teachers and family told me to stop reading them. As I was learning what it was to be a man and to handle the world, they kept telling me, stop, turn off, tune in. Stop, turn off, tune in. Watch Netflix and let people make you uncomfortable. Do work that accomplishes nothing and help the system keep floating. And that's the thing. None of our work matters. First the industrial jobs, then the office admin jobs, next lawyers and physicians. Everything can be replaced by automation. The point of our working population is a sort of debt that we owe humanity. It isn't that we need the work done, it's that we need our population. And because our ancestors survived and made everything capable of arriving where we are today, the species deserves to be preserved. It's like we are inheriting the privilege of our ancestors. And I don't know if that's entirely true, but it makes sense to me that that's why our society would look the way that it does. So working with cannabis, MDMA, Dostoevsky, Marcus Elliott, Midwest Emo, holistic health, I'm just trying to bring people back to themselves. I'm trying to bring you back to you. If I can inspire you to respect yourself and to build traditions and healthy habits which help you help yourself, perfect. That's exactly what the aim of the show is, because it's not like I don't have anything to sell you. I don't have any sort of ideology that I want you to get to. I want you to figure out what plants you like and what colors you like and what architecture styles you like and what kind of house you want to own. It's like these things that are just like America's not going to tell you these things are important, but they are really, really integral into establishing a whole life, into reaching all of the aspects that it means to be human. You can't really specialize as a human being. Like an animal doesn't know how to just run. Even a rabbit knows how to chew. So another study, which isn't free, so I don't have the whole thing, but here we can see that relative to baseline, medical cannabis patients demonstrated significant improvements on measure of executive function and clinical state over the course of 12 months. Verbal learning/memory performance generally remained stable. Improved cognitive performance was not correlated with medical cannabis use. However, clinical improvement was associated with higher CBD use. Analysis suggests cognitive improvements were associated with clinical improvements. So, while medical cannabis patients demonstrated significant improvement on executive function and clinical state, only CBD use was associated with directly with clinical improvement. So maybe CBD does have a better potential in the therapeutic setting. However, I still think there's something missing from the argument. So if we're able to see that, from the MDMA episode or one of the MDMA episodes, we talked about how there's this doctor and the theory that they have is neuroplasticity is basically your brain being malleable or flexible. So what you want to do is that it's like when you're a child, you have a lot of neuroplasticity, which is why you can learn language. It's why you can listen to your parents. It's why you can do all these things. But as you grow older, your brain becomes less and less plastic and less willing to assimilate new information and new experience. And that's where you get PTSD. That's where you get negative, toxic, thinking patterns. And those getting solidified is because your brain has solidified around them, basically. But so if that's true, and MDMA might be able to help that by increasing neuroplasticity by, I think it's the amygdala and the hippocampus, increasing the interconnectivity between them. Thus, the new association and doing that is a new association because it's unlocking fear-based memories, but flooding them with different sorts of dopamine and different sorts of passages, allowing them to be reassociated. And this is undoing traumatic fear-based processing. Why wouldn't cannabis be able to offer a similar effect? And this is a question that has been addressed by some research. And here we can see that this is a study talking about the neuroprotection of THC and how it can be able to be used to affect and help the brain. So the protective effect of THC lasted for at least 7 weeks. And this is, again, it's an ultra low dose. So it's not about getting people ripped as fuck. It's about how having some of it can really help. And this is on a mice model, so they're cutting up these brains and there's something to it. And another thing is that it removes plaque from the proteins that are causing Alzheimer's in brain cells, so it's it's doing these things where it's neuroprotective. It helps fight against Alzheimer's, and it also the people using PTSD, they found that a lot of people who are using it for PTSD use it for and use it successfully for helping with sleep issues. So it's like you've got neuroprotection, you've got this working on helping clean up the brain, and then you've also got improved sleep quality. And to me, that looks like that's going to make the brain much more likely to be able to address information, engage with information, and grow into the perspectives or new perspectives. And I don't have the research right there in front of me. I'm not a doctor, and that's not a fact, but to me, intuitively, that's what I'm seeing here, is that if MDMA is working this way in therapy, if we had cannabis therapy in the same level of care and structure, it would likely be able to do the same thing. And so, like, why does everybody want a panacea? Why does everybody want the same medication to work for everyone? Again, some people are allergic to peanuts, yet we don't blame peanuts or those people. We understand that it's just how nature played out. Rather than these unfocused studies on general populations, I think it would be very interesting to do prolonged studies and study the brains of those who cannabis works well for. Those who saw their working life, family life, and spiritual life improve after use. Perhaps doing so could allow us to identify why it works so well for them, and in doing so, why it doesn't work so well for others. From the work above, we learned that, consistent with prior research, this study found increased rates of coping-oriented use of cannabis and greater frequency of cannabis use among medical users with PTSD scores compared with low PTSD scores. So people who have higher PTSD are more likely to use cannabis. In addition, sleep improvements appear to be a primary motivation for coping-oriented use. So considering we're seeing this pattern, and there's a theory that PTSD is correlated to trauma set, and to undoing the trauma increased, and to undo the trauma, increased neuroplasticity can really help, then it looks like cannabis is fulfilling a similar function repairing PTSD as MDMA. Again, this is just my theory. A question that I have is, why don't we engage in the subjective side more? Sure, maybe someone who's depressed has had less incidents of suicidal ideation, but how are they feeling? Maybe they're still fucking miserable, but they just don't want to leave their cats behind with anyone to care for them. There's a lot of reasons symptoms might not line up with the lived experience of patients. So I think that some questions that would be interesting are, can you do chores high on cannabis? Does cannabis help you do them? Do you think that if it's a part of your mindfulness routine with an emphasis, do you think it could if it was part of a mindfulness routine with an emphasis on intention? Could you imagine using it to forgive yourself and to repair your relationship with yourself? All these questions seem hippy-dippy, but they're almost the foundation of the work being done in therapy. If cannabis can help you look in the mirror, accept yourself, and see concrete steps forward, then it's worth years of professional work. However, these things are hard to track, so I understand the lack of available literature on the subject, but more in it, I still do. We must understand our place in our setting. In America, it's very illegal to give advice without expertise, and so there's no advice being given on this show. It's also a land of double standards, since everyone bitches that we don't have enough research on cannabis or its effects, and yet pharmaceuticals can hit the market within a year, and vaccines have been issued globally. People will happily get a rushed bunch of chemicals jabbed into them, but are scared of a plan. Oh well. Okay, but I will say I fucking love therapy, and I really will go up to bat for therapists, because I think it's similar to the professorial class, in that I think that they have a lot of value in establishing sanity and in checking you and making sure that your thought process is something that can be followed and is worthwhile. So I think that there is a real inherent value to these people, and I think that it's important to I've completely lost my fucking train of thought. No. I was talking about therapy. I think it's really important to do this because it's like, as somebody who's incredibly self-critical, which I assume most people in my audience would be, you're always thinking about what you're doing wrong and what you could be doing to hurt the people around you and things like that. And the thing about it is that people love crying wolf. So if you're always listening to people's criticisms of you, you're likely to be caught into negative loops and to be essentially narcissistically manipulated into turning into somebody that somebody else wants you to be. Meanwhile, in therapy, you'll have somewhat of an objective bystander who is able to talk these things through with you. And if you give them the full picture and the full honesty, they will be honest with you and tell you when you're fucking up, or if you're in an unfair situation. And I think that that is one of the most useful fucking things you can do for yourself. Absolutely. It's so fucking important. Because, like, just, I think it's so important to learn how to trust yourself. So I just highly recommend that. None of this is anti-therapy. All of this is very skeptical of pills. Again, pills have been around for less than 200 years. America, the country, is older than the pharmaceutical industry. Back in the day, like, you know, it was willows that we used for headaches. It was honey that we used for medicine. You know, like, it was these things that were much more based in medicine, or much more based in, like, plant and organic things and, like, holistic things. And it's like, we're spending centuries on this fucking health shit just for doctors to tell you, it's like, yo, like, you know, you could just fucking go on a run. You could just, like, eat better. You could, like, you know, try to, like, really invest in your life. And, like, I think that is important. I also think that having a spear is important. This thing's so fucking cool. This is gonna be the logo, by the way. I do like myself some funny aesthetics. I'm gonna, like, I think everybody who has been close to me knows that I do have socialist sympathies. I just hate how it's implemented. You know, so it's like I'm very sympathetic to Russian thinkers, but I hate the USSR. You know, it's like I don't really like Lenin, but at the same time, like, there are movements within the socialist that were very important. You know, it's like I am ultimately a supporter of women's lib. I am ultimately a supporter of the sexual liberation, but there is, like, this idea of, like, it's so frustrating to be in this country, and it's so frustrating to be a intellectual, and because you have two sides that are wrong. Like that news story that's coming back in the news cycle. By news story, I mean it was published, like, this week. But it's an old story about this German psychologist who, you know, ran a pedophile program and saw if it would positively affect children. And the reason why he did this is because he grew up with a World War I veteran father who fought in World War II, both sides with the Germans. So he grew up with a Nazi father, and their philosophy was, like, never touch your son, never interact with your son, just, like, make him very austere and make him very strong and brutal, you know? And, like, I believe, honestly, like, seeing something there, I think that is also grooming so that Hitler could be able to then reach the children better, because if they were not connected to their parents and yet the party was so warm and there was the youth group and there was all this, you know, stuff like that, then that would be actually ideal for that environment for him to do that. And then I don't, like, you know, so it's like, I think that was a strategy more than that was a philosophy, because also keep in mind that Hitler was cutting off the heads of these young boys in his youth group for sacrifice in Himmler's castle. So I wouldn't say that he really cared or gave a fuck about them. They were really just objects. So the austerity project was also objectifying them, which is awful, because you should not neglect a child and not give them love. But then this psychologist, who was the son of a man like that, thought that this is the most evil thing in the world. So if sexual repression caused this, then what is sexual liberation? Not knowing about all the kinky shit behind the Nazi party. But then he, you know, he's like, well, what is sexual liberation? So then he's like, well, what about, you know, fucking boys, you know, from the age of whatever, you know, like, what about adopting them as sons and things like this? And it's like, guys, have we not... Our society as Christians and the Islamic society are built off Aristotle. Like, the Jews can claim that they're not, so it's like, you know, because they do predate him. But if you're a Western Christian, if you're a Christian, or if you're Islamic, you owe something to Aristotle. And within Aristotle is the mean, the median. You know, so it's like, say that you're a cowardly person, right? Well, being brash is also a sin. Being brash is also a vice. You know, so it's like you have the cowardly man who can't even defend his homeland, and then you have the brash idiot who has almost died 5 times this week. You know, the honorable thing is somewhere in the middle. So the coward should try to be more like the brash man. And as Aristotle says, it's better for him to try to overshoot towards that direction, considering how cowardly he is. Just like it's better for the brass man to overshoot in the cowardly direction, because them doing that is more likely to put them in the center. Here, we have two people with nothing in the center, because we have one group of people saying, do not love your kids, and then there's another group of people saying, let me love your kids. You know, and it's like, both of these are wrong. Both of these are wrong. Obviously, we're somewhere in the middle, where it's like desexualizing children, but giving them a healthy amount of love. And something that is fascinating, it's a dangerous name, but I mean, like, everybody's fucking talking about it. Everybody fucking, you know, it's like, I think it's important to stand up for people, you know. I think it's important to talk about things. Something that Alex Jones brought up was that the Jewish people were the first people to stop child sacrifice. That is the beautiful innovation of the circumcision. Because when you have the Britons, when you have the Druid Britons, when you have the Aztec, when you have the tribal people, no matter where throughout the world, it doesn't matter if they're from Americas, Europe, Asia, Africa, or Australia, all of them engaged in child sacrifice. Everybody did that, and it seems that it did do some, like, you know, like that was the structure of society. Sparta used to throw babies off of fucking hills. You know, so it's like it was only the Jewish people with Abraham who stayed his hand in killing his son, and then instead did circumcision. That was the only people to really innovate the change. And then after that, the Christians inherited that, because the Jews said, we're not going to kill our own children. However, we are the chosen tribe and no one can join us. And then the Christian innovation after that, after these people abolished killing their children, then the Christian story is that, so the pagans believe that if it's like, all right, so if we have a bad harvest, you don't need to sacrifice your son because you're a peasant, and the gods don't even want your son. We have to sacrifice the king's son. So who is the King of Kings? Well, Jesus Christ. But also, who's his king? God. So the King of Kings, the Almighty, the real guy, God, sacrificed his very own son. So God's son, Christ, died for all people, so that all people could join in the practice of not killing their children. That's how that looks to me. And seeing that tradition, it's like I think it is so silly. I think it is so silly to write off all of those innovations simply because you don't like some fucking weirdos that dress in robes and pretend to be Catholics. You know? The Antichrist can hide in Christian words. The Antichrist can hide in Christian trappings. That's definitely possible. So don't blame anybody who says, like, don't trust people when they say that they're Christian. Don't trust people when they say that they're about these things. Instead, look at them and look at the ideas actually behind them and start to understand that, because again, like, I was not aware of those ideas, and I credit Alex because he's the person who put that to my attention. I think he brought that to a lot of people's attention. The fucking Jewish people he was talking to didn't know that. You know, so I think it is a beautiful point. And I think it is, like, that's where really it is. Like, I do feel like we're deeply indebted. We're deeply indebted. Ultimately, I am against circumcision because I do believe in the natural aspect of the penis. I don't believe in bodily mutilation at all. But if... that's funny. That was gross. But if we're going back like 6,000 years, and the question is, do you want to kill your child or circumcise them? Yeah, I'd probably circumcise my child. You know, so I just thought that was another interesting thing, because that's not what Hitler did. Hitler was sacrificing children to try to contact the occult and the spiritual. So really feels like we lost the war when all of these runaway Europeans in America who have no settler blood are talking about alternative spirituality and waking up the old polytheistic religions, and they do some real funky shit like drink blood, you know, because it's just like, I mean, okay, so like I'm kind of outing myself as like how much I've been exposed to these people. I don't approve of what they do. You can't really have a conversation with them about it, because then they immediately freak the fuck out and get... I have told someone who I share an ancestry with, because we're both Welsh, and I have said that our ancestors are ashamed of you. So that's the worst criticism I've probably given this archetype of people. But from New York to LA, there's this BDSM, pain, power, neo-pagan movement that is literally as satanic as any evil heathen or Nazi. You know, like, because they're doing the same shit. They're sacrificing children, and they're like trying to eliminate people. That's ultimately like that's like ultimately their goal. And like, I know that that's like a strange thing to like, I don't know, but it's like, if you're trying to convince children with propaganda, then yeah, dude, you're those people. Because it's like, I grew up alone. Again, I've already explained this. I grew up alone. I had to make everything make sense for myself, and I had to reach the point which I'm at myself. And I wasn't given, I was given propaganda, and none of it worked, because it was like, I was just like, what is the inherent logic behind this? Like, how does this actually apply to things? And none of it really wore off on me. I mean, like, I accidentally propagandized myself by studying the Russians, But like that's more of like a moral thing where it's like I inherently believe that it's like I would rather benefit my community than myself alone. And I see that as like probably coming from being trained in Slavic virtue. But, you know, it's like it's not the same thing as like things are real and there's a real society. You can think everything's a societal construct, but then you don't like yes, but then we're just talking about reality, you know, because if everything is one thing, then it's the same thing as when we started, and that's why, you know. But I don't know, it's this stuff is very abstract and difficult, and that's why I'm trying to normalize the conversation on it, because again, like, I identify as a centrist, and what does that mean to me? Does that mean that I want everybody around me to be a centrist and to agree with my ideas? Absolutely not. I just think that you shouldn't be arrested. If you want to talk about whatever you want to talk about, whether that is abolishing the federal government or stealing all the money from rich people, all of that, I don't care. Like, you can advocate for whatever position you want to, and again, people disprove themselves, you know. So it's like, if you have somebody who has like, I've never met anybody who enjoys watching Richard Spencer's content. I've never met a single person who said that they were a fan. And yet, I think everybody I know knows him, you know, because he's been in the news and because he's been talked about. But, like, if he was just left alone to be some fucking loser on the internet, I don't think he would have gotten any traction. And that's why it's just, like, don't only listen to the people who say that they're your ally and the people who say that they're your enemy. Listen to as many people as you can and start to trace back good ideas. Trace back the history of policy and like see which policy benefits you and which policy does not benefit you. See which policy benefits your friends and which ones don't, and which ones benefit immigrants and all these things, you know, because it's like, it's really easy to say I love immigration and like we need as much as possible and then ignore how that affects the immigrant population. You know, like, it's really easy to just say, well, I'm moral, I like this, I support this, if you go against me, you're bad. That's very lazy, bad faith arguing, because you have to look at the numbers and you have to look at the effects of these things. Another thing that really, really fucking frustrates me is that, like, there's these discussions that I have that are just like the reality of things, where it's like, my Islamic friend has mentioned that being Islamic and being of Arabic descent is a pass for being conservative, where he is allowed to be in whatever progressive environment he wants to be and make whatever critique he wants to be, and it's respected because it's seen as part of his culture, you know. So it's like anything that is not us is allowed to be away from the standards of people. Yet when talking about the West, people have this like stranglehold identitarian movement where you have like the progressives who want to reform it in their own image and are like, okay, because you're an American, we have to work together to create the Soviet Republic within the States. And then like the conservatives are talking about preserving this idea of the country that doesn't fucking exist. And it's just, I think that we need to retool the conversation towards actual policy. We've talked about prison reform my entire life. So like, I remember being a child. I remember being 12 years old and seeing things on TV that were about how we have a predatory prison system. And yet not a single president has changed that. Not a single president has made a complete ban on for-profit prisons. You know? So it's like, yeah, we can debate about all this stuff. We can fight about all this stuff. But I'm pretty sure pretty much all Republicans and all Democrats understand that for-profit prisons are immoral and we shouldn't have them. What about the roads? I think we can all assume that we want better roads. What about transport? You know, things like this. What about localized industry? Like, people will be like, oh my god, like, the left wings are global. No, they're fucking not. No, they're fucking not. Like, even Alex Jones said, I was arrested by George W. Bush twice. I'm not a fucking right-winger. Like, no shit. He's just misaligned towards these ideas. Leftists and Democrats used to be against corporations, and they used to be against Target coming into neighborhoods because then Target would kill out all the other businesses around them. Same thing with Walmart. Same thing with all these things. Like, you know, they used to be against the, you know, commodification and
Like it's economic colonialism is essentially what the corporations are doing. So yeah, no. If you are a center leftist, you oppose that. So it's like you're not going to be for those people. And it's like I do think that ultimately, I understand that this is perhaps the most divided that the country has ever been. But I don't think it's real. I think that to a large degree, it's blown out of proportion rhetoric, and things simply aren't this way. In that if you put in the work to discuss things with your neighbor in a calm, friendly, and sober voice, I think that we would realize very quickly we have much more in common than we don't. So I think that would, that's how I would see a reunification of the country actually happening. Because I do think that we mostly agree on things. And it's just about emphasizing that and working towards that. And again, I would say, my joke is that I think that American centrism is that you have Huey Long on one end, and then you have Edward Snowden on the other, where it's I think that the centrist positions are literally fuck monopolies and fuck corporations and fuck barren capitalism, where people just have all this inflated value. And then the other one is fuck the government, it is spying on you, and it is literally trying to manipulate your life and is at war with you. So it's you have a distrust of corporate money and a distrust of business, and then a distrust of big government and a distrust of power. And I think that is really the defining axiom of the American average person, the American moderate, the 33% of the country that identifies as independent. I think that's the reality behind them, is that they ultimately are not a fan of any of that shit. Anyways, I want to put on a video because I think that this is one of the funniest bits. One of the funniest bits. And I don't own this. This is Lenny Bruce. This is Lenny the fuck Bruce. So no credit to me. But this guy is fucking... He writes shit that don't quit.
The whole South... See, the South is a different country, and the people speak a different language. And because when we talk loud, that's rank. When anybody goes, ba ba ba, then he's mad. But in the South, everybody goes, ba ba ba, and they're not mad because they always talk that way. When you talk to us and we go, ha ha ha, that's shitty up north. In the South, if you don't go, ha ha ha, you're not a good fella. And you're not jovial, and you're not... So when you always see the pictures in the southern courts where everybody's smiling, we take it, look at that, it's not solemn. Those schmucks think you see a camera, you smile. So what Belli did, you can really see it with Ruby. It's it sums up this way. If anybody talks that way to me, I can do one... In other words, I'm worried about his safety. Because I know I'm superior to him, because I'm brighter, because I know that I talk closer to this way than he does. Anyone who talks that way is the brightest of bright. Anybody who talks that way is, well, there's poor people, they don't understand it. If Albert Einstein talked that way, we would have never had a bomb. My name is Albert Einstein. And I got a theory here. Get out of here, shit kicker, you. Look here, buddy. I got a theory here. It's so embarrassing, those people. He keeps coming back with this nonsense.
But yeah, so that's I think that's a great fucking bit. He is super fucking funny and also just really lucid, because at the same time of really making this hilarious caricature of the South, he also succeeds in pointing out the hypocrisy of judging people for their accent and the fucking snobbiness of New York. And it's just fucking hits all the points super fucking fast. Lenny Bruce is the goddamn man. Anybody who's unfamiliar, just try to get into him. It's gonna be some of the best fucking times of your goddamn life. Anyways, we're gonna be doing this spear tutorial at some point soon, because I think that shit is funny. I like that. We got 15 minutes to kill. It's fucking Friday. Thanks for hanging out. It's been cool. Sorry for just going on these rants about things like that, but it's I think that nice. I do think that ultimately a lot of life does come down to this moral conflict. And like that's what I mean when I'm talking about America gives you no direction. Is that as an American with no family, it's like both of my parents died and I was raised outside of the church. I didn't have anybody in common. I'm not an Italian Catholic. I'm not like not a New Yorker. I don't have an in-group. So for me, it's like when you ask like your country, what am I supposed to be? Who am I supposed to be? What is moral? And they're like, well, that depends on who you ask. And it's like, oh. So essentially the answer is it's up to you. And it's like, for me, okay, fine. But for most people, you're just going to lead them to hedonism. Like if you ask, like this is biology. People are driven to sugar. People are driven to fat. People are driven to do things that is evolutionarily rewarding, and preying upon that, or maybe not even preying upon that, but neglecting, nurturing people, and just leaving them to the whims of nature seems incredibly cruel to me. Because like as a teenager, the most meaningful aspect, other than dating people and getting to learn how to interact with people outside, but the most important interaction was my obsessive reading of books. And I hated it. I'm dyslexic. Reading is difficult, but for me it started with this insecurity of everybody thinking they were so much smarter than me because they were reading. So then this is also why I try not to signal like that sort of thing. But I read obsessively to try to get on the same page and see where they were coming from and seeing if they had access to better material than I did. And I found out they didn't. I eventually found out the books I loved, but mostly I was reading books I hated. And now at this point, I know how to pick things that are more aligned with my interests, and I can have a higher success ratio of picking what I'm into. But my point is that there was years and years and years, maybe a fucking full decade of this philosophical journey, this philosophical war that I fought within myself. And like, this is embarrassing because this is my show, but like I used to like beat myself, and I used to like self-harm, and I used to be all into like that really negative energy. So to me it was a literal war. It was a literal war against my psyche. And eventually I found out what my line was. I found out what I believed in. I found out what I wanted to stand up for, and then I forced myself into that mold, and I made myself try to be the best exemplar of my values and my belief in virtue. And I think that is the proper response to the challenge of being human. So this is where it's like reading isn't important because you need to know any specific information, or because it gives you like a magical access to some sort of esoteric wisdom. Reading is important because you need to learn who you are. Just like watching movies, like, reveals your aesthetic and your atmosphere, and just like drawing and painting can like teach you a lot about like what you really want to manifest in your life. Reading is a similar activity. It's like if you really know what music speaks to you, then you know how to calm yourself down. If you really know what books matter to you, and that you can read the books that you loved as a teenager, that you love in your 20s, that you love in your 30s, that you love in your 40s, and these are hard books to find, because this is where it's like I really suggest classic lit, is that you have to choose some good fucking books. Because like the books that I loved as a teenager that were written recently in my lifetime, I don't fucking care about now. And hey dude, I love you, but like Jonathan Safran Foer was a really important author to me as a kid, and as I've grown older, I just don't really give a shit. I think he is very talented, but ultimately there's something that offers more to me with Dostoevsky and with more dense literature. Ultimately, I would say that that's what it is. And it doesn't matter what dense literature it is. It doesn't matter if it's Don Quixote. It doesn't matter if it's War and Peace. It doesn't matter if it's the Vedas. It doesn't matter if it's a little book like the Tao. It doesn't matter if it's the Bible. It doesn't matter if it's fucking Greek plays. As long as it's some sort of coherent moral system, I think it's really important for people to be trained in them. Not so that they have those moral systems themselves, and not so that they abide by those laws, but so that they know what laws are. They know what moral codes are. They know what, they have an experience with the thing. Because this is where like philosophy and metaphysics are important, is like, what is divinity to you? What is the point of life to you? What do you think we should do? What are the things that motivate you? And like I think that you should be going through this very difficultly. Like it should be very difficult for you to go through this in your adolescence. And then I think that the difference is that once you're a young adult, you should have some confidence and also much more willingness to listen. And then once you reach like 35 is like when you should really become political. You know, like there is something that the Greeks were accurate. Like it should take time for you to have developed the life experience, the history, and the education to really understand statecraft. And, you know, it's like, it's not to say that kids are stupid. It's just that kids should understand that they should have humility and understand that life is a really complicated thing. And you're not going to be the same person in 40 years. So, you know, there's a time and a place, and it's important to get yourself educated and all these things. But like, you know, and that's what I say. Like, it's because it's like, I would say the Greeks would say don't get educated too young. And I would say, like, fucking at least get educated at all in moral systems so that you know where you stand, how to stand. And like, because it's like, if people aren't educated in this way, then they don't know the vectors of attack, and they don't know why they feel uncomfortable with certain movements. You know, it's like there's things that people are deeply upset by and they deeply want fixed, but they have no ability to really address because I feel like they don't even know what they're uncomfortable with. And that's where I'd say like the lack of morality is one of them, where it's like, so why do I feel like you can't send the elderly to war? Or like, why can't you have certain kinds of relationships? Or like, why can't all these things? You know, it's like, it's because it's a moral argument. And where do morals come from? Well, as an orphan, no one can tell you that. You know, so it's like, I'm an American orphan. Nobody can tell me anything. You know, nobody has any advice for me. Nobody knows, you know. I'm not a Protestant. That's sure, that's like what my relatives are. But like, I have no relationship to that church. I did not grow up around people who I am related to by blood. I've been adopted into and like lived around Catholics, and I'm very grateful to that community, and I love them. But ultimately, like, you know, they have adopted me a little bit as an outsider. You know, where it's like I'm a little bit of a token to them. It's not like you know. But no, I would say no. We're chill. We're chill. If there was something I would identify, it might be Catholic, just because not that I agree with them, but because I do really appreciate them being there for me. But you know, but basically the point is that there is no authority over to me to think that I should think something or to tell me what to think. And so it's not like I was given these morals, you know. It's not like I was given these things, and I think that everybody can develop them themselves, because I do think it has to do with your stomach, and it has to do with your sensibilities. I think as you study morality, you'll see what you do and don't think is good. Like, you know, it's like, I think that greed and overextension and being rude and like all these things, like you learn more and more about why you shouldn't do that. Dostoevsky, like, I know he's a meme at this point, but he is also fucking amazing in teaching you the negative repercussions of being a degenerate person. And I mean that in terms of etiquette and manner and love, where it's like you see these like failed generals, you see these drunkards, and you see these people who are just like relying on prostitutes, notes from under the floorboards, and like crime and punishment, like all these things. You see these people pushed past the edge of morality because of an individual drive. And I think that that is a really important lesson to learn, and I think that people struggle to learn lessons like this because they're not open to these conversations or experiencing these things. And I think that they really can only be experienced through literature or spirituality. And I consider everything literature, so I don't care if that's history, like Thucydides, or it's, you can even find it, but like Goethe's On the Nature of Plants. You know, like there's all these things that help people understand the world around them. And engaging them is important because nobody can really tell you this, you know? Nobody can really give you an education on these things. And that's why I really support people doing the work themselves. And Logo Daedalus says, read books, you know? And like, I do ultimately support that message. I think it doesn't sound good. I think it sounds cheesy. And this is why I engage in spoiling books, is that, and also, dude, I don't mean it sounds cheesy as an insult. I mean, I think that an average person, when they hear read books or when they hear like people talking about books, they feel gatekept. You know, they feel locked out of the community. And that's why I try to do a lot of work to just normalize ideas and to give people what I see as like a foothold and an introduction into things, is because I'm trying to really encourage people doing the work themselves and finding themselves in a better place, because I think that that's how to do it. I think he's on the same page, but it's just that, like, I think that I think that you got to give people a little bit. You got to you got to give people some warmth before they want an oven. You know, that is not the best way of phrasing that. But it's like you got to show people like a torch before you invite them to the campfire. You know, you got to give people a taste of it. Like, you know, you got to give a feral dog a little bit of the chicken before you feed them the chicken and the rice to make sure that their digestive system's all right. You know, I think that one works better. And I think that for people who are scared off or people who are not just didn't have a gentle initiation into literature, that stuff really can help. And I've been reading this lately just to give you a check, Mother by Gorky, and it's going really well, honestly. I'm not gonna say he's like the most talented writer ever, but his style is definitely even. And it's just this conversation about, like, you know, the working class, and it's this like portrait of, like, you know, factory workers and like how awful family life can be, you know, where it's like, and like here's all these bad things that are happening, you know, within, like, you know, you got drunkards and abusers and like all these things and like a class family unit, but then like there's this sort of empathy that comes with the idea that this is, you know, the idea of the empathy that's like this is a factory worker and, like, you know, it's like their life is being taken from them by these people or by people, you know. And I'm not gonna defend the philosophy of the novel, but as a piece of fiction, so far 3 chapters in, again, even style, I am scared of it just becoming another plotless novel, which is hey, rich criticism coming from me. I understand every single thing I've fucking written is plotless, but it's like I think Letters from Nowhere or Notes from Nowhere by William Moore is a utopian novel. Holy shit, it's so boring. It's just about, like, it's the same thing with What Is to Be Done. Because then, like, at What Is to Be Done, it's like the introductory letter is the best fucking part of it. And then, like, maybe the first 100 pages are good, but then it just becomes this, like, description of, like, a factory. And they're like, yeah, we have this, like, factory that produces money, and now it's, like, this, like, you know, commune estate just in the woods, and we just, like, you know, take care of people and all this other stuff. And it's like, yeah, bud? Okay. Yeah, I'm sure that this is a serious treatise. I'm sure that these ideas are very well vetted. I'm sure that everything is just going great with it. But, I don't know, still lovely to read. I do enjoy, and that's the thing about loving an entire canon, is that if you love the Greeks, you love all of the arguments. You love Zeno, you love Socrates, you love Aristotle, you love them people. You know, and like with the Russians, you know, you got the imperialists, you got the socialists, you got the liberals, you got the foreigners, you got, like, all these different people. You got the Republicans. You know, it's like there is a variety of voices within it, and studying all of it gives you access to all these people, maybe even people you don't agree with. And I think that is a very useful exercise to enjoy the work of people who you don't align with, because I think it gives you a better position to critique ideas, and it just gets you more familiar, you know, because, like, the more experience you have practicing using your moral muscle, the more refined you're going to be able to use it, and the more confident you're going to be in producing your own positions. Anyways, thank you so much for hanging out and, you know, being here for this episode of High Lit. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy the show. Got any questions, just leave them down, and I'll be happy to address them. Happy to take ideas. We do Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and I will see you next week on that Tuesday. So stay awesome. Keep reading. Invest in yourself, and, you know, love life.